My name is Amy C Willis. I am the holistic sober coach. I've been working professionally in the addiction recovery space since 2019. I have been sober since 2016 after struggling with a pretty severe alcohol addiction personally and also losing my dad to his alcohol addiction. And only since getting sober and stepping outside of normative alcohol culture have I really started to learn the truth about alcohol in terms of its inherent risks, harms, and impacts. Over the last 5 years of working in this space, what's become clear is how little awareness there is around alcohol's negative impacts on us as individuals, communities, organizations, and beyond. And ultimately, we are all impacted by alcohol in one way or another. I am deeply passionate about telling the truth about alcohol, equip people with information so that they can make informed, empowered decisions about their bodies, their lives, and their wellness. Given how ubiquitous alcohol is and how inherently harmful it is, it only makes sense that we have just as much access to accurate information around alcohol as we do to alcohol itself. Alcohol is a women's issue, it's a health equity issue, and it's an issue of consent. Through powerful conversations like these, I am confident that we can and will shift normative alcohol culture and ultimately reduce the harms caused by alcohol.
Thanks, Amy. I'm so looking forward to having this conversation with you today as we're collaborating on workplace well-being and what the impacts are and the trends are in order to support the mental health crisis that we're currently in. I'm Jocelyn Pepe. I am a fractional head of well-being, and I'm a mental health researcher and coach. And I work to support organizations with a whole systems approach to workplace well-being through strategies and structures to really support a whole and well culture change. I have personal firsthand experience witnessing and being impacted by alcohol and addiction in my life. And I felt the effects of it for most of my life. When I had my first child at 27, I really stopped drinking as much as I had in my early years. And that was because my body really couldn't tolerate it anymore. And I wanted to be a really conscious and present mother. So no amount of alcohol really felt good waking up with kids. And I continued that. And then 3 years ago, I suffered a traumatic brain injury cycling. And I actually stopped drinking completely in order to reduce the neurotoxic effects of alcohol in my brain in order to really recover without the neuroinflammation that is associated with alcohol. I'm really passionate about this topic and this conversation so that we can begin to break the stigma around mental health and the impacts of alcohol and how socially acceptable it is right now and the detrimental impacts it has on mental well-being.
Alcohol is neurotoxic. It is also an inherently addictive substance. It is psychoactive, and it's also responsible for more than 3 million deaths annually. In the Western world, alcohol consumption has become exceedingly normalized. Alcohol was classified as a Group 1 carcinogen in 1988. So the global alcohol industry, or big alcohol, significantly shapes the messaging and narratives when it comes to what we think and know about alcohol. This is largely done through expensive ad campaigns and aggressive lobbying efforts to influence global alcohol policy. In 2023, it was estimated that the alcohol industry spent more than $7 billion on advertising and marketing. And what this tells us is that they are investing a lot of money to really control the narrative and shape public perception of alcohol. Both the World Health Organization and the World Heart Federation have clearly stated that there is no safe level of alcohol use for humans, and the safest amount to consume is none at all. Alcohol is a depressant, and we know it negatively impacts sleep, our mood, our mental health, our energy, our stress levels, our digestion, and so much more. Alcohol is causally linked to at least 7 different types of cancer. Outside of genetic and hereditary factors, alcohol is the leading risk factor for breast cancer. And we have a lot of data around awareness levels of the relationship between alcohol and breast cancer. Globally, those awareness levels range between 20 and 30%. End of March of this year, results came out from a pretty big study on alcohol and heart disease, and the results were staggering, particularly for women. This study revealed was 8 or more standard drinks per week increase women's risk of heart disease by 45%, 3 to 7 standard drinks per week increase that risk by 29%. For women reporting binge drinking, that increased heart disease risk by 65%. Within this study, binge drinking was considered 3 standard drinks per day. This study involved 430,000 participants. 189,000 of those participants were women. It was, if you were to follow that old protocol of a glass of red wine a day, particularly for women, you would be increasing your risk of both heart disease and breast cancer. So this is why we talk about these things. And what we're seeing is smaller amounts of alcohol carry a negative impact. In the long run, drinking less or eliminating alcohol altogether is highly impactful in positive ways for your health. Alcohol costs all of us billions of dollars every single year. Globally, substance use disorders impact 10 to 20% of the population, with alcohol use disorder being the most common substance use disorder. Alcohol consumption causes death and disability relatively early in life. The Canadian Substance Use Costs and Harms Report, which covers a period of time between 2007 and 2020. According to this report, alcohol accounts for $19.7 billion, or 40% of the total cost, and is the most costly substance by a significant amount. So within the business sector, because we're talking about workplace impact and harm, lost productivity is defined as lost value of work due to premature death, long-term disability, and short-term disability, which includes absenteeism and impaired job performance, also called presenteeism. In 2020, lost productivity attributable to substance use accounted for $22.4 billion, or approximately $600 per person. In this same year, there were nearly 74,000 substance use attributable deaths. This translates, we are seeing big numbers like this in other parts of the world. US, for example, lost productivity costs are around 179 billion annually. In Australia, this number is around 3 billion a year. In the UK, it's more than 7 billion pounds annually. I hope what's clear from this overview is that alcohol carries a huge burden and has far-reaching negative impacts on individuals, on society, and workplaces included in that. This points to really an urgent need for increased awareness and education efforts to bolster knowledge and shift perspectives and behaviors in an effort to reduce costs and harms across the board.
Wow. That feels really, really significant to hear all of that information around health, impact, presenteeism, absenteeism, like billions and billions of dollars, so many years lost, like years lost of life. It's really staggering to hear all of that information in one place. So I appreciate that incredible overview. I really want to highlight what's so important. And this was some of the work and study I did. I did my master's in the psychology and neuroscience of mental health. One of the courses was in addiction, and it was really raising awareness to the impacts of alcohol in the brain. So that's really where my focus has been, bringing that into the workplace, because the work that we do in needing to tap into the cognitive performance and executive function of individuals, and alcohol impairs this ability. Alcohol is a depressant, we know. It impacts thinking and behavior and cognitive performance, which is really what I wanted to highlight. There is such a spectrum of alcohol use. And one of the ones that I came across that really impacts workplace is that problem drinking is 4 times more as common as severe alcohol dependence. What we're talking about, we're bringing a whole spectrum of knowledge to the workplace right now. And the impact on the workplace is around those 1 to 2 to 3 drinks a day or after work or in a week, and really impact the presence of individuals in the workplace. What I would really love to do is start to talk about what this has to do with the workplace and how this gets integrated into workplace well-being programs. And I have noticed some trends in Canada around increased hiring in the disability space. There is a lot to talk about, like the uptick in disability claims around mental health. And what we want to look at from a workplace perspective is mental health strategies, well-being strategies, and DEI and DEIB strategies with alcohol in the workplace, because the workplace can both contribute to or ameliorate the use of alcohol from stress levels or culture type conversations. There's a real topic around mental health, and though we're talking about it more since the pandemic, it's still quite stigmatized. So my hope through these conversations is that we can destigmatize some of the conversations around alcohol use, actual why people are turning to alcohol in the first place. It's to relax, to unwind, like you had talked about stress, to relax, to unwind, to decompress. But we know that those are actually inhibiting those de-stressing, unwinding, relaxing, because it's having a negative impact on the physical body and the brain and the sleep mechanisms. With mental disorders in the workplace, most of everybody who is working and having a mild to moderate level of a mental disorder or impairment are a working population. You think about the work design, working conditions, and workplace culture, employee mental health is impacted, and that includes substance use. A lot of stress we know in the workplace can happen when people are in high psychological demand, but low power. So middle level management. Also, obviously, there are certain professions that have higher levels of stress. And I know you had found one that talked about the legal profession being the top profession with alcohol or substance use. And 1 in 5 attorneys abuse alcohol, which is double the national standard. These studies are really staggering. And the healthcare profession is also another high stress industry, which is interesting that would be kind of the second one where a profession is really going to alcohol to numb or relax or not feel the feelings that they really need to feel. We have the most generations in the workplace right now than we've ever had before, all at the same time. From a generational perspective, alcohol use in the workplace is also really important because what we know is that the younger generations are not turning to alcohol as much as the older generations. They're also the generation that can be most impacted because most mental health disorders are onset in like late teens and early adulthood. It's one of the core generations in the working population, mid 30s to mid 50s, that are turning to alcohol more than ever. And so when we think about EAP and the various different levels of support within an organization, that's really critical and important. And also external perspective and external experts are also important to create some awareness. So 62% of adults under the age of 35 say they drink, which is down from 72% 2 decades ago. So that's a 10% decrease, which is a really positive trajectory. The increase in alcohol consumption in 35 to 54-year-olds is a bit terrifying. And that is a population where we're seeing increases in, depression, anxiety, mental health disorders. And that's where we were talking about women specifically in this, late 40s, early 50s going through menopause and the impacts that has on those populations. Also an increased drinking in adults age 55 and older. Positive trends. We also have some other trends that I think our work will really help and support. And then the other area of the workplace that I think this conversation really lends itself to is the diversity and inclusion strategies. When I was doing the research for this conversation, I learned that the statistic is that just close to half of the world's population does not drink alcohol and has been lifetime abstainers. That makes me consider what populations globally are heavy in the alcohol consumption. And I think that that's an important conversation as our workforce becomes increasingly global with immigration, expats, with more of a globally working workplace. Half the world's population doesn't drink. The inclusivity part of this conversation is important because traditional conferences, networking, building your career, building your business aren't going to work for everybody in the workplace anymore. It'll work for the younger population. It's not going to work. I think there's really something to pay attention to in DEI initiatives and the belonging initiatives, as well as the workplace well-being initiatives. Additionally to that, I wanted to kind of highlight, just in a general sense, the working population that is coming into work can be struggling with addiction, can be struggling with stress management, therefore coming into the workplace hungover, which is impacting their performance. And so any type of environment that is encouraging alcohol and alcohol consumption could be very triggering or very isolating for any individuals who are suffering. Or the inclusivity part is ensuring that you're not just offering wine or beer, and you're offering something really lovely that people who don't want to drink can drink, that's not just like soda water, or keeping it like, so everybody's engaged at the level that they want to be engaged at. The workplace really impacts drinking in behaviors of individuals and social groups, and it impacts behaviors that expand into employees' families or the local community. So I think there's the micro picture of the individual and how that impacts them. And then there's the macro picture of the families who are involved and the local community. Hope is that this conversation today raises awareness because oftentimes there can be denial, loss of control, or a lack of awareness around the impacts of alcohol and just not knowing. That really is kind of where I want to leave it at. For Amy, as we conclude this topic, is there anything that you would add to conclude?
I also feel very hopeful and very excited about how we can create change and to just really communicate that there are alternatives that can look different, that are more well-being focused, that are more inclusive, that are actually in service to the individual and organizational health.
If anybody has any questions, Amy and I will share our information with you. Reach out at any point in time if you're looking to know more about alcohol culture, if you're looking to incorporate more strategies into your workplace well-being or inclusion strategies. We are partners to really facilitate change in the health and well-being of the global population.